30 seconds on the timer. The bomb disposal expert's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't steady the wire cutters. "Get the woman out of here," he shouted. "She's too emotional for this." But Agent Sarah Martinez wasn't leaving. Not when 847 children were still inside the school. What happened in those final 30 seconds didn't just save every life in that building. It proved that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to the person everyone thinks is too unstable to trust. The morning of March 15th had started like any other at Franklin Elementary School in suburban Denver. Children laughed in hallways, teachers prepared lessons, and parents dropped off their kids with casual kisses goodbye. Nobody could have predicted that by 10:15 a.m. the school would become the site of the most complex bomb disposal operation in Colorado history. Agent Sarah Martinez had been with the FBI's Hazardous Device Unit for 4 years, but this was only her second major crisis as lead technician. At 29, with her slight build and soft-spoken demeanor, she looked more like one of the elementary school teachers than someone trained to handle explosives that could level city blocks. The call had come in at 9:47 a.m. Franklin Elementary, confirmed explosive device, building in lockdown, children unable to evacuate. The bomber had made his demands clear through a phone call to the school principal. Any attempt to remove the children would trigger immediate detonation. When Sarah arrived at the scene, she found chaos barely contained behind police barriers. Parents pressed against yellow tape, screaming for information about their children. News helicopters circled overhead, and emergency vehicles lined the street for 3 blocks in every direction. FBI Special Agent in Charge, Robert Chen, briefed the bomb squad team in the mobile command unit. "The device is in the main hallway, directly outside the cafeteria where 847 children and staff are currently locked down. The bomber claims it's triggered by motion sensors, heat detectors, and a timer. We have no visual on the actual mechanism." Sergeant Mike Harrison, the senior bomb disposal expert with 15 years of experience, studied the school blueprint. "This is a textbook terrorist scenario. High visibility target, maximum casualties, impossible evacuation. Martinez," he looked directly at Sarah, "you need to stay back on this one. When things get intense, we can't have anyone freezing up." Sarah had heard variations of this comment throughout her career. Despite completing the same intensive training that had broken numerous male candidates, despite graduating second in her class from the FBI's Explosives Unit school, despite successfully disarming 17 devices in her 4-year career, her colleagues still questioned her emotional stability under pressure. "Sir," Sarah replied calmly, "I've studied the bomber's profile. This device configuration matches the signature of someone who studied our standard disposal protocols. We might need to approach this differently than usual." Harrison snorted. "Martinez, this isn't a psychology class, it's a bomb. You cut the right wire or you don't. Overthinking gets people killed." But Sarah had spent weeks analyzing recent terrorist attacks, studying the psychological profiles of bombers who specifically targeted schools. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated psychological warfare designed to exploit the exact thinking that Harrison represented. The team's initial approach was methodical and by the book. Using robotic cameras, they confirmed the device was a sophisticated assembly of plastic explosives surrounded by what appeared to be a maze of colored wires, pressure plates, and electronic components. The timer showed 47 minutes and counting down. "Standard protocol," Harrison announced. "We identify the power source, trace the detonation circuit, and neutralize in sequence. Rodriguez, you take point on imaging. Thompson, prepare the disruptor. Martinez, you monitor from a safe distance." But as the team worked, Sarah noticed details that troubled her. The device was positioned exactly where FBI protocols would dictate setting up equipment. The wiring pattern, while complex, followed textbook examples of how not to build a bomb, almost as if someone wanted disposal experts to make specific assumptions. 20 minutes into the operation, Rodriguez's imaging revealed the first surprise. "Sir, this isn't a standard timer mechanism. There are backup circuits I've never seen before. And these pressure plates, they're arranged in a pattern that doesn't match any known configuration." Harrison's confidence began to waver as each new discovery revealed additional complexity. The device had 3 separate timing mechanisms, 5 different triggering systems, and what appeared to be anti-tampering protocols that would detonate the bomb if disturbed incorrectly. "This is beyond textbook," Thompson admitted, as his hands began to show the first signs of nervous tremor. "Whoever built this studied our procedures inside and out." With 31 minutes remaining on the primary timer, Harrison made his first attempt to neutralize what appeared to be the main power source. The moment his wire cutters touched the designated cable, A secondary timer activated, showing only 15 minutes. Backup system activated, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with stress. Sir, cutting that wire triggered an acceleration protocol. Harrison stepped back, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool March air. This thing is designed to punish standard disposal techniques. Sarah had been studying the device configuration from every angle available through the camera feeds. In her mind, she was building a three-dimensional map of the bomber's psychology, trying to understand not just how the device worked, but why it was designed the way it was. Sir, she said quietly, I think this bomber studied our training manuals. Every protocol we're following is exactly what he expects us to do. Martinez, we don't have time for theories, Harrison snapped, but his voice carried less conviction than before. With 12 minutes on the secondary timer, Thompson attempted to isolate what appeared to be a backup power source. The result was immediate. A third timer activated, this one showing only 8 minutes. Sir, we're being played, Rodriguez said, his professional calm cracking. Every move we make triggers another countdown. Harrison's hands were visibly shaking now as he stared at the device through the camera feed. 3 separate timers, all counting down at different speeds, all triggered by following standard FBI protocol. We need to evacuate the building, he said finally. This thing is impossible to disarm. Sir, the bomber specifically said any evacuation attempt triggers immediate detonation, Sarah reminded him. Those children are trapped. With 7 minutes showing on the fastest timer, Thompson made one final attempt to cut what analysis suggested was a dummy wire. The result was catastrophic. All 3 timers suddenly synchronized, showing 6 minutes and counting down rapidly. That's it, Harrison said, backing away from his equipment. I'm calling for emergency evacuation. We can't risk the entire bomb squad. Sir, those are 847 children, Sarah said, stepping forward. I have an idea. Martinez, this isn't the time for experimentation. You're too emotional to think clearly under this kind of pressure. But Sarah was already putting on her protective gear. Sir, with respect, this bomber didn't design this device to be disarmed using our protocols. He designed it to defeat our protocols. We need to do something he didn't expect. What do you mean? Chen asked, his attention now fully focused on Sarah. The device is designed to punish logical, sequential thinking. Every wire we cut based on standard training triggers another countdown. But what if the solution isn't about following procedures? What if it's about understanding the bomber's psychology? With 5 minutes on the synchronized timer, Sarah was already walking toward the school building. Martinez, stop! Harrison shouted. You'll get yourself killed and take those kids with you. But Sarah had seen something in the device configuration that her colleagues missed. The bomber hadn't just studied FBI disposal techniques. He had specifically designed this device to exploit the psychological pressure that bomb disposal experts feel when lives are at stake. Sir, she said into her headset as she approached the building, this bomber is counting on us to panic. Every trap, he said, is triggered by someone working too fast under pressure. But what if we approach this completely differently? Sarah entered Franklin Elementary through the main entrance, her portable camera streaming live video back to the command unit. The hallway was eerily quiet, with emergency lighting casting strange shadows across colorful student artwork that now seemed tragically poignant. The device sat exactly where intelligence had indicated, a complex assembly of electronics and explosives positioned near the cafeteria doors. Behind those doors, 847 children and their teachers waited in terrified silence. With 4 minutes on the timer, Sarah knelt next to the device and began her own analysis. Unlike her colleagues, she wasn't looking for the correct wire to cut or the right component to disable. She was looking for the psychological signature of someone who had designed this device to be psychologically impossible to disarm. Martinez, what are you doing? Harrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. Follow protocol, identify the primary circuit, and work systematically. Sir, the protocols are the trap, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the countdown showing 3 minutes and 47 seconds. This bomber built a device that gets more dangerous every time we follow training. Sarah began examining the device from angles her colleagues hadn't considered. The wiring wasn't just complex, it was deliberately confusing in a specific way. The bomber had used colors and patterns that would naturally draw an expert's attention to the wrong components. First, I see it now, she said, her voice filled with sudden understanding. This isn't really 3 separate timing systems. It's one system designed to look like 3. The bomber wanted us to trigger those secondary timers because they're not real threats, they're distractions. With 3 minutes remaining, Sarah began doing something that violated every protocol in the FBI manual. Instead of trying to disarm the device, she began following the psychological logic of its construction. The bomber didn't want to kill children, she said, her realization growing stronger. He wanted to prove that he could outsmart us. This device is designed to be disarmed, but only by someone who understands that it's not really about explosives. It's about psychology. Martinez, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Chen's voice was tight with tension. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. Sarah's hands moved across the device with surprising confidence. Instead of cutting wires, she began pressing sequences of buttons that appeared to be decorative, but were actually the real control mechanism. The timers, the multiple circuits, the complex wiring. It's all theater, she explained as she worked. The real disarm sequence is hidden in what looks like non-functional components. With 1 minute and 47 seconds remaining, Sarah found what she was looking for, a series of pressure-sensitive contacts disguised as structural elements of the device casing. "Sir, I need you to trust me," she said, her fingers hovering over what appeared to be completely irrelevant parts of the device. "This bomber studied our psychology as much as our protocol. He built a device that can only be disarmed by someone who stops trying to be a bomb disposal expert and starts trying to think like him. Martinez, you have 90 seconds. Harrison's voice was barely controlled panic. "Cut the primary wire and get out of there." But Sarah was already implementing her solution. Working from her understanding of the bomber's psychological profile, she began a sequence that had nothing to do with traditional explosive disposal and everything to do with solving a puzzle designed by someone who wanted to prove his intellectual superiority. With 68 seconds on the timer, Sarah pressed the final sequence of hidden contacts in the exact pattern that the bomber's psychology demanded. The device went silent. All 3 timers stopped. Every light on the complex mechanism went dark. "Device neutralized," Sarah said simply, her voice remarkably calm. "Children can be evacuated safely." The silence in the command unit stretched for nearly 10 seconds before Chen's voice came through the radio. "Confirm device status, Martinez." "Sir, device completely neutralized. All timing mechanisms disabled. No remaining threats detected." As the school's emergency doors opened and 847 children began filing out to reunion with their parents, Sarah walked back toward the command unit carrying the now harmless device. Harrison met her at the building entrance, his face a mixture of amazement and embarrassment. "Martinez, how did you know to do that? Everything you just did was completely against protocol." Sarah handed him the disabled device. "Sir, the bomber wasn't trying to blow up the school. He was trying to prove he was smarter than us. Once I understood that, the solution became clear. The device was designed to be disarmed, but only by someone who could think beyond our training." Agent Chen approached as emergency crews began clearing the scene. "Martinez, I need a full report on your disposal technique. What you just did needs to be studied and incorporated into our training immediately." "Sir," Sarah replied, "the most important thing I learned today is that some bombs aren't meant to explode. They're meant to test us. And sometimes the biggest mistake we can make is assuming that every threat requires the same response." Over the following weeks, Sarah's approach to the Franklin Elementary device became a case study at the FBI Academy. Her understanding that psychological analysis could be more effective than technical expertise revolutionized how the Bureau approached complex disposal scenarios. But perhaps the most significant change was in her relationship with her colleagues. Harrison, who had questioned her emotional stability, became her strongest advocate. "Martinez," he said during the unit's after-action review, "what you did wasn't about being emotional or unemotional. It was about being smart enough to see what the rest of us missed. You saved 847 lives by thinking differently." Sarah was promoted to senior bomb disposal specialist and began developing new training protocols that emphasized psychological analysis alongside technical skills. Her methods would eventually prevent dozens of terrorist attacks and save thousands of lives. 6 months later, when the Franklin Elementary bomber was captured, he confessed that his device had been specifically designed to defeat traditional FBI disposal techniques. "I studied their manuals for 2 years, he told investigators. "I built a device that would get more dangerous every time they followed their training. I never expected someone to approach it as a psychology problem instead of an engineering problem." When asked about Agent Martinez's successful disposal technique, he added, "She solved my puzzle by understanding that it wasn't really about the bomb. It was about proving intellectual superiority. Once she realized that, she beat me at my own game." The woman they called too emotional for bomb disposal work had proven that sometimes the most dangerous situations require not just technical expertise, but psychological insight. Sarah Martinez had shown that understanding the mind behind the device can be more powerful than understanding the device itself, and that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to the person who can think beyond the obvious solution to find the truth hidden underneath. The 847 children of Franklin Elementary School went home safely that day because someone understood that the most complex problems sometimes have the simplest solutions. If you're smart enough to see beyond the surface and brave enough to trust your understanding over established protocol,